The European settlers who arrived in the Lahontan Valley had been uprooted from many of their traditions and the links of kinship that might have constrained or defined their roles. Every culture, when it reaches a certain level of sophistication beyond the point of grim survival, develops a need for trade networks to obtain goods not provided by its immediate surroundings.
Mary, Elizabeth, Sarah, Susan, you touch lives in a special way. Anna, Virginia, Martha, and Nancy, you face the desert challenge day by day.
Many of the women who came west found it a liberating experience. The needs of new communities opened doors to women that might otherwise have been closed, and many found employment for their talents outside the traditional role of wife and mother. One such woman was Catherine Haggerty Kenyon, who always claimed the title of first white woman to settle in Churchill County. Catherine's husband, Asa Kenyon, is credited with founding Ragtown, considered to be the first permanent settlement in the valley. Ragtown was strategically located where the emigrant trail across the 40-mile desert met the Carson River.
And as they washed their clothes and spirits in the stream, and sang to ease a weary load, and they tenderly remembered the loved ones buried on the road where the Carson River flows, and the cottonwood trees grow. Bring down your fiddle and your bow, and I'll sing a song for you at a desert oasis, Ragtown rendezvous.
In 1854, the Kenyons became the first to maintain a year-round presence at Ragtown, although there had been seasonal trading camps there for several years. They offered food, water, fresh livestock, and repairs to the exhausted immigrants staggering off the 40-mile desert. Here, Kenyon became infamous for his ruthless trading practices. In 1868, Catherine and Asa were each listed on the Churchill County tax records as half-owners of Ragtown. A shrewd businesswoman, some would say an unscrupulous one, Catherine was also owner of the Virginia and Wadsworth Toll Road for many years. By 1869, Catherine was listed as the sole owner of Ragtown, a status she held for 25 years until 1894. In the remaining years before her death, Catherine occupied her time with businesses and land holdings in Wadsworth. While at Ragtown, Catherine and Asa hired a young immigrant couple by the name of Sanford and introduced them to the hotel-keeping trade. Nancy Whitney Sanford, known to the whole community in her later years as Grandma, claimed she was the second white woman to settle in Churchill County. In 1861, at the age of 22, she had married James Merritt Sanford in Wisconsin. For their wedding trip, the young couple set off across the plains by ox wagon. They reached the Carson River in the fall of 1861, and the Kenyons hired them to help run Ragtown Station. In 1870, the Sanfords bought the hotel at Stillwater and operated it for 30 years. Their first hotel was of canvas with a dirt floor. Supplies were expensive. Flour was $5 a sack, roughly a day's wages for a working man. Most supplies had to be freighted from Virginia City, and many came all the way from San Francisco. Deliveries were irregular, and at times there was nothing for Nancy's guests to eat but bread and water. She never turned a hungry person away from her table, regardless of race or circumstance, but she always required that they chop wood in payment for the meal. Neighbors remarked that her woodpile was taller than most people's haystacks. The local Native American people gathered bundles of greasewood to trade for a meal of Nancy's victuals. Some years later, another early settler, Delia Brown, attended a quilting bee at the Sanfords and wrote in her journal,
The ladies had great times hearing Nancy regale us with tales of her early days here. She remembers the last of the Indian wars, but claims she was never as frightened of the Indians as they were of her. Of course, Nancy is afraid of neither man nor devil.
As the valley gradually acquired a more permanent population of settlers and ranchers, the far-flung residents began to need more services than just the hotels and trading posts that had catered to the first wave of immigrants. At a dusty crossroads in the middle of the valley, a post office was established in 1896 on the ranch of Mike and Eliza Fallon, and the infant community that would one day grow to be the city of Fallon was born.
This old town should have burned down in 1929. Well, that's when we stood in line, waiting for our Sioux, swallowing our pride. This old town should have burned down in 1931, when the rain refused to come. Air filled up our bellies and the dust filled up our lungs, and we thought our time had come.
In 1906, Callie Ferguson was appointed Fallon's deputy postmistress, and a year later she became postmistress in her own right. Callie was born in Massachusetts in 1859 and came west with her parents as a small child. The family settled in Washoe Valley. After completing her education at Bishop Whitaker Seminary in Reno, Callie taught school in the Washoe Valley, Wadsworth, and Churchill County, where she met and married John Ferguson. A few years later, she was widowed and returned to school teaching. When Callie was appointed postmistress, she left teaching and embarked on a career more easily combined with her postal duties. In partnership with her friend Mary Black, she opened a stationery and bookstore in the post office building. As postmistress, Callie was required to furnish the postal boxes used by patrons. She had handsome oak boxes made and installed at a cost to her of $2,000, a very considerable sum in those days. Black and Ferguson also published and sold some of the first photo postcards of the town. The images they chose reveal pride in the growing, bustling little town.
This old town was built by hand in the desert of the motherland. There must be rock beneath the sand, hand in hand, this town still stands.
Black and Ferguson's became a meeting place for the community. They were the agents for textbooks used in the county schools, and the women expanded their stock to include gifts, toys, and party supplies. Masks for the balls and costume parties that began to grace the social calendar of the young town could be bought there as well. Callie's partner in the business was also born in 1859. Mary Hook was one of 7 children of a pioneer couple who had come west with the Donner Party, but had the good fortune to leave it before its fateful crossing of the Sierras. Mary married Edwin Black, and they settled in Fallon in 1903. Mary tutored private classes in the German language, in which she was fluent. The couple also owned the first mortuary in town. Mary was prominent in civic affairs and had a busy social calendar. She enjoyed a reputation as a wonderful hostess, and accounts of her gatherings appear frequently in the local papers of the time, always praising the decorations in her home. Mary continued to entertain lavishly well into her senior years, holding a New Year's Eve party every year until she was 83. Callie served as postmistress until 1912. That year, Mary Black's husband died, and Mary took over the management of the mortuary business they had owned together. With Mary fully occupied with the mortuary, Callie continued to run the store alone until she was in her 80s. Even today, Fallon residents remember Callie as a fixture in her store. Always a large woman, she grew to nearly 300 pounds, and her favorite spot was a large wicker chair in which she sat until a customer needed her attention. As the town grew, so did the community's need for professional services such as medical care. By the early 1900s, there were 2 women doctors practicing in Fallon. Dr. Virginia Smith moved to Fallon in 1903 with her husband, who was a druggist. She was 62 years of age, he was 74. Dr. Smith immediately set up her practice and for a time was the only doctor in Churchill County. For several years, Dr. Smith held the position of county physician, with responsibility for the care of the indigent sick, quarantining infectious diseases, performing autopsies, and examining insane persons. For these duties, she was paid $50 a month and was expected to provide all medicines, dressings, and bandages for her indigent patients. She also made professional calls in the city and vicinity for $2.50 and would travel for miles by horse and buggy to minister to the ill. On a bitterly cold December day in 1912, she was called out to a patient in Hazen. On the way back, the spirited young horse she was driving took fright and bolted. Dr. Smith was thrown from the buggy and badly cut and bruised. Were it not for the bearskin robe she had wrapped around her, she believed she might have been killed. The crew of a freight train bound for Fallon saw the runaway horse and moments later spotted Dr. Smith lying near the track. They stopped the train, picked her up, and carried her back to her home in Fallon. She recovered from this mishap and continued to practice until just a few years before her death in 1923 at the age of 82. Dr. Nellie B. Hascall's professional card appears in the Fallon papers in 1906. She and her husband, Dr. Charles Hascall, had a joint practice.
If a lassie wants the ballot to help run the town.
Dr. Nellie was an active supporter of women's suffrage, and on the 4th of January, 1913, the Churchill County Eagle reported, with a rather distant air,
We are requested to announce that there will be a meeting at the house of Dr. Nellie B. Hascall this Saturday afternoon for the purpose of forming a suffrage organization at the request of Miss Ann Martin, State President. All who are interested are invited to attend. Churchill is the only county in the state that has not formed such an organization.
When her work the laddies equals, give her equal pay. If a body pays the taxes, surely you'll agree that a body earns the franchise, whether he or she.
Nevada's women won the franchise in 1914 by an amendment to the state constitution. The first election in the state of Nevada in which women were allowed to cast their ballots was a school bond issue held in Sparks on March 27, 1915. 5 weeks later, in a Fallon city election held on May 4th, the women of Churchill County were into politics. Churchill County's first female delegate to Carson City was Alice Toll. Her family bought the Buckland Ranch on the Carson River south of Silver Springs in 1903, when Alice was 6 years old, and in 1916 they moved to Lahontan Valley's Sheckler district. By then, World War I was raging, and Alice was at Berkeley majoring in economics and political science. She was active in campus affairs and the Red Cross, drew up a survey of child labor in San Francisco, and carried every Liberty Bond and War Stamp Drive according to the local papers. In 1922, back in Fallon, she stood for the state assembly as a Republican and won. In 1923, she traveled the road to Carson City. Alice served on the Judiciary, Educational, and Irrigation Committees, and the Journal of the Assembly testifies that she took an active part in debate from the start.
Assembly Bill Number 3, an act to validate county high school bond elections. Assembly Joint Resolution Number 5, memorializing Congress to liberalize repayment. Assembly Bill Number 17, an act relating to children born out of wedlock and matters pertaining thereto.
In July 1923, at the end of the legislative session, Alice married William Young, and she apparently did not seek re-election. She was killed in an automobile accident at the age of 38, leaving her 2 small children motherless. Lillie Van Voorhees Pinger came to Fallon with her first husband, Walter Van Voorhees, an agent of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, in 1909. Walter's death in 1919 left Lillie a widow with 2 small sons, and she took employment as secretary to the board of directors of the Truckee-Carson Irrigation District. In 1921, she married Leo Pinger. Lillie stood for election to the 1929 Assembly as a Republican, declaring,
"There is a place in the party system of government for women. Too often, men do not give consideration to laws affecting the growth, development, and training of children."
Elected, Lillie advocated locating a state orphans' home at Fallon and chaired the irrigation committee. But Lillie, already widowed once, was to see yet more sorrow. In 1941, Leo died while her 2 sons were overseas during World War II. Then, in 1942, her younger son, Wayne, was captured and died on the death march on Bataan. The following year, his older brother, Bruce, was killed in action near the Solomon Islands. He is Nevada's only Medal of Honor recipient, and in 1959, Fallon's Naval Air Station was named Van Voorhees Field in his honor. Lillie had lost the 3 men she loved in less than a 20-month period.
This old town should have burned down in 1944 when the last man went to war. They came back different, if they came back at all. And this old town should have burned down in 1954 when the earthquake was at our door. All our hopes were buried beneath the boards and bricks, and we almost called it quits.
Luella Kirkbride was married in 1895 to Andrew Drumm, an irrigation specialist, and the young couple came to Fallon in 1906. A Democrat, Luella was the only woman in the 1939 legislature. She proposed an amendment to the community property law passed during the previous session. Luella's amendment would have granted the right of survivorship to either spouse. Her bill met with much resistance, as her opponents saw something sinister in giving a widow the same right to full possession of community property that a surviving husband enjoyed. As a result, her bill was killed in the Senate. Sadly, while Luella was in Carson City fighting for the rights of widowed women, her husband Andrew died, and she herself became a widow. Luella was defeated in her bid for a second term in the legislature. Education has always been a priority in Churchill County, and from the beginning the vast majority of teachers have been women. Many were scarcely older than their eldest student, and in class photos it is often difficult to be sure who is the teacher. These women and their male colleagues took their responsibilities seriously and eagerly participated in opportunities to further their professional training. In 1910, Nevada's 3rd District Teachers Institute was held in Fallon. 44 teachers from Humboldt and Churchill counties attended. Only 7 were men. The program covered such topics as teaching children how to study, citizenship from the study of history, the making of men and women out of boys and girls, and the movement towards the consolidation of rural schools. Laura Mills grew up appreciating the natural beauty of Lahontan Valley. Her mother, Anna Bailey Mills, was a gifted naturalist, skilled markswoman, and taxidermist who mounted many bird specimens for the Nevada State Museum. Anna passed on her enthusiasm for the natural world to her daughters, especially Laura. Laura was a member of the first graduating class of Churchill County High School. At the ripe old age of 19, she passed the teacher's examination and received her teaching certificate. Her first position was at the isolated railway settlement of Tobar Station in Elko County. The one-room school had fewer than 10 students. Laura received $65 per month, and out of this, she paid room and board. In her time off, Laura explored her surroundings with an interest and enthusiasm she was to retain all her life. In October, her students invited her to go pine nutting, a new experience which resulted in the loss of Laura's long hair. It became so tangled with sticky pine pitch that the only solution was a drastically short haircut. The following year, Laura returned to the classrooms of Churchill County, where she was to teach for the next 40 years. She became one of the community's most honored and remembered teachers. Not restricting herself to the classroom, Laura also led 4-H and church youth groups, sharing her enthusiasm for photography and natural history. Although Laura remained single and had no children of her own, she touched the life of almost every child in the valley for 2 generations. Laura continued to further her own education, too. In 1924, she was admitted to the select Yosemite Field School, where she studied for several summers. She became an expert photographer. As a gardener, she hybridized new varieties of irises and lilies. All her life, Laura's love of the natural world drew her out into the desert that surrounded her, trips that sometimes led her companions into more adventure than they had bargained for. It was said that no road was impassable to Laura until she was actually stuck. As she grew older, friends noticed that it seemed to become increasingly difficult for her to leave a place and come home. It was as though she felt she might never have the opportunity to go there again. July 24, 1966 was declared Laura Mills Day in Fallon, and she was honored with a civic ceremony. After her death in 1973, Laura Mills Park in Fallon was dedicated to her memory. Minnie Pauline Nichols wed Ernest Blair in a ceremony scheduled for 5:30 a.m. so that the newlyweds could catch the only outgoing train for Nevada. After 16 years in Goldfield and Tonopah, the Blairs arrived in Fallon in April 1924.
We just could not have picked a worse day to arrive. There was a violent wind and dust storm in progress, and as I looked out of that car at Lahontan Valley, I could just easily have kept right on going. My beloved mountains just seemed too far away.
Minnie, who had always wanted to live on a ranch, named her new home Atlasta Ranch. There she kept an immaculate yard filled with flowers and exotic birds, raised 3 children, and thousands of turkeys. Her mentor in the turkey business was another woman, Anna Johnson.
I can remember when Anna raised 600 birds. I thought she was a real magician, and I looked to her for real advice.
But Minnie soon surpassed her teacher. At the peak of her operation, she was raising 2,500 birds and shipping them to 38 states. In the spring, Minnie would sleep out in an open shed by her brooder houses and look after the chicks day and night. In the fall, when all her birds had to be dressed and prepared for shipping in the space of a few days, Minnie employed up to 24 people. Her turkeys gained a nationwide reputation for excellence and, on occasion, graced the Thanksgiving table at the White House. In 1947, Minnie retired from the turkey business, but her boundless energy needed an outlet, and the following year she opened the local Spudnut shop in partnership with her daughter Helen Millward. The shop was to become a Fallon landmark. Tiny in build, Minnie was a physical and mental dynamo. As well as caring for her family, farm, and restaurant, Minnie devoted her life to good causes. To raise money for charity, she baked hundreds of Yellow Angel food cakes that became famous locally as Minnie's Sunshine Cakes. She also solicited donations from local businesses to bring electricity to her Paiute friends at Rattlesnake Hill. A devout Episcopalian and staunch Republican, she believed in using her mind for thinking and had the courage of her convictions. In her home or in her Spudnut shop, Minnie cussed and discussed the events of the day with countless people from all walks of life. She even said it is all right for a lady to say, "damn it," when nothing else will do, because, she maintained, it is merely a contraction of the phrase, "I condemn this situation." Minnie's forthright mind, generous hospitality, and business acumen earned her the friendship and confidence of senators and governors, paupers, and millionaires. When Minnie first arrived in Fallon, she joined the Artemisia Club, which provided a link between town and rural women in Churchill County. Founded in 1909 to work for the betterment of the Carson Sink project, Its objective was to provide a comfortable place for women to stop on their way into town. After traveling dusty roads on a buckboard, they could stop to nurse their children or to freshen up before doing their shopping. The club also took an interest in enhancing the cultural life of the community and sponsored public lectures and performances. After 84 years, the Artemisia Club still exists. Today, one of its missions is to provide scholarships to local students. Another group that worked to improve the community was the Women's Draper Self-Culture Club. In 1914, the club sponsored the installation of a public watering fountain in the middle of Main Street. Farmers, teamsters, and school students watered their horses at the fountain, while dogs appreciated the special ground-level trough thoughtfully provided for their use. The first motorists in the valley used the fountain's water to fill their radiators. The structure was removed in 1930 when Main Street was paved from side to side.
Distance, the city lights do shine. The sidewalks gleam with neon dreams that fall from time to time. And our children's children ask me why I didn't go. Say the heart of any town is the people that you know, and it will always call you home.
Fallon's local newspapers played an important role in fostering community awareness and neighborliness in the town's formative decades. For this, two remarkable women, in partnership with their husbands, were largely responsible. Neva Guston married Del Williams in 1908, 6 months after he took over the editorship of the fledgling Churchill County Eagle from its founder. Neva looked after the business management of the paper and for several years was its linotype operator. They published the paper together until Del's death in 1938. Neva continued in active ownership of the paper for 18 more years until its sale in 1956. Neva was one of the organizers of the Artemisia Club and encouraged local district news columns. In this, she was joined by her colleague, Ethel Reed Smith. Ethel, with her husband Claude, published Fallon's other weekly newspaper, the Churchill County Standard. Since one was published on Wednesdays and the other on Saturdays, the two papers were complementary rather than rivals, and most families in the valley considered it essential to take both in order to keep up with community happenings. At one time, over 18 districts in the valley boasted local reporters who kept the community informed of happenings in their local area. Vacations, social events, a particularly good crop, a quilting bee, illnesses, births, weddings, and engagements, all were grist to their mill. None were paid. They wrote their columns for the love of it. Allene Stuart Baumann came to Fallon with her parents as a young girl in 1918. She was just 19 years old in 1925 when Del and Neva Williams of the Fallon Eagle asked her to step in and cover the Harmon district beat while the regular columnist was ill. That temporary assignment lasted 67 years. Allene was not just an observer of community life, but an active participant. Her membership in fraternal and community organizations kept her finger on the pulse of the Harmon district. Allene retired in 1993 at the age of 86 when her failing eyesight made writing too difficult. She had borne witness to the life of her community for more than 2 generations. Now the only survivors of that long tradition are an occasional column of Hazen happenings and the Stillwater notes compiled by Goldie Norcutt DeBraga. Like Allene, Goldie arrived in Churchill County as a girl when her family came to join relatives who were farming on the Newlands Project in 1922. By the time she was 20, she was married and living on a farm at Stillwater, and a few years later, in 1932, she took over writing the Stillwater notes for the Eagle. In 1996, her notes still appear every week. The women of Churchill County were instrumental in nurturing Fallon's growth from a dusty frontier crossroads to a bustling town with a strong sense of community, deeply rooted in its desert soil. In Fallon, many of them found opportunities to use their strength and skills in new ways. Today, as the community faces a new era of change, the women of Churchill County are involved in every aspect of life in the Lahontan Valley. Like their grandmothers, they are building a new future on the foundations of the past.
Mary, Elizabeth, Sarah, Susan, you touch lives in a special way. Anna, Virginia, Martha, and Nancy, you face the desert challenge day by day.